Let's talk about the big political news that, in my opinion, we'll start over. Here it is. Fox News. Politico confirmation of Hunter Biden laptop materials prompts criticism of earlier suppression of story. Twitter blocked sharing of New York Post story on laptop last year. So the New York Post told the truth. Hunter Biden he's a crackhead, correct? He's a crackhead. Mm-hmm. There's photos and videos of him with like women of the night.
Ill repute, yes.
Trying to be ill repute.
Smoking bongs.
Is that no? I don't know. I don't know if ill repute is fair and acceptable to our libertarian audience who think sex work is acceptable.
The oldest occupation on earth.
There you go.
That's why I say women of the night. That's not offensive, is it?
Ladies of the
Negative.
night. Yeah.
I'm trying to be a libertarian, although personally not a fan. But you got to be careful because. I don't know. That one's actually tough. We should have a conversation about that maybe when we're not doing family.
We could even have a prostitute on someday to give their personal experience.
Of the night.
A woman of the night.
So anyway, look, Hunter Biden is a mess, but I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, sure, he's a guy. He does a thing. A lot of people have problems. I'm not here to revel in a man's problems. The problem I have is it's not criticism of an earlier suppression of the story. It's criticism of a Democratic operatives working in media, working at big tech, suppressing news that would have hurt Joe Biden in the election to a great degree, not because Hunter Biden does drugs, but because the emails showed that they were holding that 10% will be held by H for the big guy, that there were nefarious deals going on. And we don't want a president going into office who has nefarious deals. Now, back when Trump was running, they're like, Donald Trump has a secret server communicating with Russia. Lies. So when their criticism was, we don't want a president entering office who has these ties to foreign interests and is beholden to them and these debts, I'm like, all right, I can accept that to a certain degree. Now, it's one thing if you're a businessman like Trump and you have buildings with mortgages all over the world. That's like saying we don't want someone who runs international business to be president for the sake that just because they run international business. Now, to that extent, I will say true in some degree for Joe Biden. But when Joe Biden flies to Ukraine and says, fire the prosecutor, or you're not getting your $1 billion in loans, Joe Biden has no right to leverage the United States providing aid to Ukraine in a conflict with Russia, or potentially there's this conflict between Russia and Ukraine, threatening them, we're going to pull out unless you fire this prosecutor. And as Matt Taibbi reported, the prosecutor was investigating Burisma, where his son was on the board. That is dramatically different from Trump having debt in buildings. So this story gets suppressed. What do we get? I think, you look at the Rasmussen study. Rasmussen did a study, found, I think it was 7 to 10% of people.
Yeah, 9%?
9% when asked. If you knew about the Hunter Biden stuff, would you have voted for Biden? No. So that would have been dramatically different. Now, here we are. What's been happening? Economy, inflation's through the roof, border crisis, Afghanistan crisis, domestic agendas failing. The squad members are, I'm already at 5. Squad members are ripping the Democratic Party to shreds, which they've been doing for some time, but now they're pulling funding for the Iron Dome. Wow, is the Biden administration completely unfit. Now, here's my favorite part. There was a poll back in August. Most Americans think Joe Biden is unfit to be president. Do you know what the poll today is? 48%. So it's not the majority because it's 48% think he's not even mentally stable.
Wow.
This is where we are.
Big number.
When the media manipulates and lies on news we knew to be true that we had already confirmed, that was independently confirmed by people looking at the emails, corroborating it, and they suppress this. This is why you end up with a cult that believes insane things like the economy is good, and regular people of different political persuasions, like everyone here probably has, different political worldviews, but we can recognize the truth when we see it.
I think what annoys me the most about this story is the media always is pulling their weight in a certain favor, right? I mean, we have innumerable examples of that in the Trump administration and going back to as long as I've been following politics. What bothers me the most about this particular episode is I cannot find, and I could be wrong, but I can't find in my memory hole one other time that Twitter actually suspended technologically the ability to share the story. They have labeled things as inaccurate. Facebook always puts their stamps on it. But the fact that if you wanted to retweet the story, you were not allowed to is a whole new level of crackdown that we never saw before.
But you couldn't even send it in a private message, right?
Yes.
Didn't they crack down on that too?
I mean, that's
you couldn't
just
even privately send it to somebody.
That is unbelievable.
They suspended one of the oldest newspapers in this country.
Alexander Hamilton, 1799.
And we all knew very early on the story was true because of independent corroboration. Statements from people like Tony Bobulinski, who came out and said, yes, I'm on those email chains. Yes, those emails are real. And we're like, okay, so I'm looking at this like it's not news. We knew it was real. What's the revelation? But they suspended a newspaper, and the crazy thing is, it's taken It's how many months? It's been almost a year. And now they're like, oh, New York Post was telling the truth the whole time.
And that's where you have to go to Twitter, the CEO, and they bring him before Congress all the time, and they never ask him hard questions. They never really ask the questions they should. But the question should be, here are an example of 10 other stories that you could consider as inflammatory, as shocking, as controversial. You never suspended, that were also false. You never suspended any of them. So Twitter, walk me through, I get it, private platform, they can do whatever they want is the argument. Walk me through the criteria that for this story, someone made the decision to say, this is why we have to suspend it, as opposed to, and you've dealt with this in your own personal life. One person says all these things, they're totally fine. You say this, and it's like, oh, suspended. Well, what was the criteria? And it seems to be, well, I just don't like that person.
It feels kind of like being in a band that was a one-hit wonder and being like, I had this big song back in the 80s because a few years ago I went on the Joe Rogan podcast and I was talking to Jack Dorsey, and it's like one people bring this up all the time, so that's the kind of the point I'm making. But I showed them a tweet from Antifa where they were like, everyone go to this place at this time to commit violence. And I was like, how has this tweet been up for months? And the replies to it are getting banned. So clearly someone at Twitter sees this, bans replies, but lets that one stay. I'm like, are you guys feds? Because the only reason I can understand that you would keep that up is it's bait.
Yeah.
From the feds.
Makes sense.
And they're like, we didn't know about it. Oh, geez. Oh, no. I'm like, nah, okay, look. I'm done playing these games. Some Trump supporter guy says #learn to code. It was, you know what it was? It was the editor-in-chief of the Daily Caller, I think, Jeffrey Ingersoll. He didn't tweet at anybody. He tweeted the hashtag. He tweeted about learn to code, and they suspended him. I got my details right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember that. It was hysterical. But you can say it about coal miners. That's what I jumped on that because that's the response that they say all the time about people in the energy industry. Well, you got to learn to code. Like that, it has been used as learn a skill that you need in the 21st century. But you can't say that to what was it? Gawker,
journalists.
Right? No, was it when Gawker was fired, or it was one
Gawker
of those?
but it was one of those.
It was
companies.
one of those publications that went down, and that was pretty funny on his part.
I hear you on the Congress stuff, but I really don't think there's anything you can do bringing these people before Congress. I think they are duplicitous. I think they are liars. I think they keep calling in Jack Dorsey, who's a spokesperson figurehead who doesn't actually do anything with the company. Because Jack tweeted, he tweeted the Anatomy of the State by Rothbard, and everyone was like, whoa, because he clearly is not. It is a weird thing from a tweet considering he provides cover for the machine. Yeah. But I don't think he's actually running the show. They keep bringing these people before Congress and saying, you did this, and they're like, oh, I'll get back to you. I don't know. Nothing happens. Nothing changes. I think this country is imploded already. I mentioned it the day before. I've mentioned it on my other show. And you take a look at the fact that they've brought... How many times have they been pulled before Congress over this stuff? 5? I don't know. There's no way there's going to be any meaningful legislation to deal with the suppression of our speech on these platforms. And the left say, but my private platform, and I'm like, it's an inane argument, okay? They have conquered the commons, plus we're locked down. A lot of places people can't go out, so this is how we're communicating. At a certain point, when they control too much, we have antitrust laws. We come in and we regulate. We do these things. We always do it. We normally do it because we don't want companies usurping the power of the citizenry and the people and suppressing the rights of the working class. None of that's going to happen because there's no way the Republicans and Democrats will agree. Even when we had Republicans in 2016-18, they were too stupid to realize what was happening, and now they're all getting banned, and they're all, but those were mostly like neocons, Paul Ryan, stuff like that. Now what we're seeing is, while the Republicans can't get anything done, Democrats are just cheating. They're trying to put immigration reform in a spending bill. Joe Biden is just ruling by decree, rubber stamping legislation as executive order, and then it just happens. So I all I see is, I was reading about decline of civilizations before, and there's a period at which it's been a while, but I can't get into the specifics, where you'll start to see autocratic rule because it becomes so dysfunctional that the only way to actually move forward is for a sovereign to decree and say, we have to do this now, otherwise we're doing nothing. So they force things to happen, and that just exacerbates the destabilization.
There are two components to this story. There's the censorship, which is extremely frustrating, suppression of free speech, what it did to the election, etc. But then there's the actual story itself, which is how corrupt is this family? I mean, obviously they've got an awful lot of skeletons in their closet. And when you've got a sitting vice president who negotiated trade deals and planned for his future, and every president and vice president plans for their future, right? I mean, they all know it's not going to last forever. But he was using clearly the power of government to build himself a very profitable, very lucrative. Heck, you saw it in his tax returns, right? His last year as vice president, his net wealth was $400 and something thousand that year, and then the year after it was 17 point something million. And you're like, wow, that's a really great profit margin.
What a good year for him.
A very good year. Yeah. And so, but there's that level of corruption that you say, well, what were the trade deals that you were negotiating? And again, the 10% for the big guy, and they seem to be with pretty awful people, right? There, it's with China, it's with Ukraine, it's with, and you know, I hate to rag on Hunter Biden. Well, actually, I don't, because he's a deplorable, a vile human being. When your brother dies of cancer, and within the year you are sleeping with his wife, you're leaving your own wife and your children to sleep with your dead brother's wife, and then while you're sleeping with your former sister-in-law, making your cousins now stepchildren, you're sleeping with her sister simultaneously, and in top of the sister you impregnate a stripper in Alabama. Yes. You are just you are a scumbag. I'm sorry, there's no other way around that. And I'm sorry, Joe Biden must hate that he looks at Hunter, because it reminds him the good son died. And that's got to eat at him, because you are truly a vile human being. Well, to do that to your kids. I mean, imagine his poor kids. And they show the kids all the time. The grandkids, Joe Biden's grandkids. My dad was dead, and this dirtbag is sleeping with mine. What a disgusting family. They're like the Kennedys without the money or the class.
Wow. Yikes. Well, I do want, two things. First of all, you did get me a little worked up talking about the lurid details of his love life. That was pretty steamy. Second of all, I would like to defend him, because this man is an artist. Okay? This man is an artist. And where would we be if it weren't for vile, deplorable human beings who create quality art?
Beautiful.
I mean, it's fetching $75K.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
so he's an artist. That's what happens. That's what artists do. They live wild, libertine lives.
This is why I said I love Chris. He's so funny.
They cut deals with China, and they kick back, 10% to the big guy while he's in office, and
no one has to know who bought the art.
Yes,
it's totally cool.
Sounds like money laundering.
A little bit, yeah.
You think?
Let me. Look, I love pulling up the story, because it's important for anybody who's like, how do I tell my friends and family about this stuff? I think there's a lot of people who are in the cult who are I don't want to say too far gone, but very difficult to reach, and it's hard to get to them. But at the very least, you can show them an article. This is from Politico, Biden Inc.
That big right-of-center publication, Politico, right? Huge.
Over his decades in office, middle-class Joe's family fortunes have closely tracked his political career from August of 2019. And I think they actually have they have like a graphic. Look at this. They show when Joe Biden enters the Senate, and then James Biden operates Seasons Change nightclub with help from unusually generous bank loans. Unusually. In 1987, he launched his first presidential campaign. So about 8 years later, his brother... James and Sarah Biden's Lion Hall group hired to push Washington agenda of tobacco trial lawyers from Mississippi. So the most important one, in my opinion, is let me try and find. I think it's 2011. Let me see if I can. Okay, here we go. Where's Joe Biden? Joe Biden sworn in as VIP. 2009 Paradigm's connections to Ponzi schemer Alan Stanford and the fraudulent Ponta Negra fund come to light. James Biden and Hunter Biden begin to unwind Paradigm. James Biden joins Hillstone International. In June of 2011, Hillstone International lands a $1.5 billion contract to build housing in Iraq. So Joe Biden becomes vice president. Joe Biden is put in charge of the Iraq operation. His brother gets contracts for building in Iraq. You look at this map put together by Politico, tracking his family's fortunes around him. And it's just, come on, it's just so obvious.
I mean, if CNN was able to track down through Facebook that old woman who shared a meme about President Trump and knocked on her door to ask her about it, you're going to tell me the government can't put in some system to say if Chris becomes president, Chris's sister can't get a $1.5 billion contract? Like, all these things were just like, oh my gosh, there was no safeguards for any of this. I mean, it's mind-boggling, the level of grift and corruption and scumbaggery. It's just, it breaks your heart because it makes you think there's no one left.
But if you were to argue the side of the people on the other side of the aisle, the people that are really hard to reach, they're just going to say, "Oh, that's politics.
That's politics. Yeah,
that's just how it goes. What's the big deal? So Joe made some money. I mean, that's how the system works.
They all do it.
Yeah,
they all do it. They all do it.
Look at Trump. Yeah, they'll tell you.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
They'll cite some stories about Trump that are not the same as I mentioned, or fake.
Yeah.
And this story from Joe Biden is from 2019. It's not like he was running for office and there was a smear piece against him. Now, I'm not gonna pretend Trump's a saint, but there's a big difference between being some crazy real estate mogul who's got a bunch of buildings around the world and you have debts on them. Like, I think it's funny when the story came out where they're like, Trump owes $500 million in debt on his properties, and people were like, "Whoa!" And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, those are his liabilities. What are his assets?" And then Trump came out and he was like, "Yes, I have mortgages on buildings like everybody else, and the buildings are worth $1 billion." It's just lies. Manipulation.
Yeah, and just the Biden, the unraveling of their level of corruption, I think, deserved to come to a head before the election. It clearly did not. But this is standard behavior for the media, where they either exacerbate stories that they think are interesting or fascinating, or a narrative. You could look to, we're going to talk about Miss Petito later on, right? There's a narrative they like to push of missing women. There's a narrative about racism they like to push. But then you have another story. Case in point, there was a terrible school shooting 3 or 4 days ago in, I forget where it was.
Newport
News. Yeah. No coverage. Because people looked at the narrative and they were like, doesn't help the cause.
Well,
nothing.
I would like to say that we did cover that at Timcast News.
Good. As it should have.
We did cover that.
As you should have, because it is newsworthy. But this is where, I think what bothers me about the media, just their level of disgusting behavior, because they push their narrative, is one of the very first things that happened when Trump was sworn into office. And I've followed media bias for a while, but this one I thought set the tone for his administration. January 20th, 2017, it was 5:30 in the afternoon, hours after, and it was Zeke Miller on behalf of the White House press pool who tweeted, President Trump has removed the Martin Luther King bus from the Oval Office.
Yes, right.
And Sean Spicer saw the tweet in real time and was like, dude, it's right there.
See it.
But it didn't matter. The damage was done. And he could have, as a good member of the press, said, hey, Sean, I got to ask before I tweet this, did you remove the MLK bust? And Spicer would have said, no, it's right there. But he didn't verify because he wanted the damn narrative. And that's what they do all the time. And you just have to see that those things explode. 500,000 retweets, 1 million likes, but then the retraction.
It's not journalism, it's gossip blogging.
It is.
That's it. Like
Gawker started all that, and now they're defunct, thank God. But
they're back.
They're back as in NBC and Politico and everyone else.
Gawker itself, a new version, has reemerged.
Is it still called Gawker?
Yes, it is.
Oh gosh.
Great.
But it really started with yellow journalism. Like, there's been a long tried history of really, just biased reporting.
Yeah.
So it's been around for a long time, and it's just gotten worse.
Yeah.
So
there's money to be made. The crazy thing is we can see it now and we're shocked by it, but imagine the stories you would have read in the paper in the 90s, the 80s, 90s, 2000s, before we had a strong internet culture that was challenging and fact-checking.
Yeah.
People just believed it.
Look at
WMDs,
NBC,
man.
Yeah, look at NBC News during the Trayvon Martin case, right? Remember they edited the audio of Zimmerman, and it was like, and he said he looks like blah 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 black, and they just clipped it. He looks like he's black, and they were like, wow.
He said something like,
he said that.
He looks like he's up to no good. He looks black.
Yeah.
And then it turns out he said he's up to no good, and then it says, is he white? Is he Mexican or black? And he goes, he's black. Yeah, the operator.
But they just took all that out.
Do you remember on September 11th when they said they found one of the guy's passports, one of the hijackers' passports on the ground outside the wreckage?
Oh yeah,
like it fell out of the airplane and landed on the ground.
I don't remember that.
That was that was media. That's insane.
Holy cow! The one thing that survived amongst the rubble is his passport.
Yeah, they're like, we got him. We know who it is.
Laid on top.
Well, that's the official story.
Yeah. Isn't that what the heck? Like a passport fell out of an airplane? What are they talking about?
Jet fuel doesn't melt passports.
Apparently not. Yeah.
I don't know why Ian went there with the story.
Basically, pre-internet news. It's like that was like the end of the pre-internet news era, and then the weapons of mass destructions thing. And it's, now we kind of have an ability to fact check stuff on our own. But before, like the first war in Iraq, I wonder how much was going on there that we don't know about.
I got it. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.